that Jesus received when he entered Jerusalem on the final week of his time on this earth. And this upcoming week, which is also known as Passion Week and Holy Week, it is by far the most important week on the Christian calendar. Our entire faith actually hinges on it. And I want you to see this passage. We're going to see this before we get to Genesis. But this passage from 1 Corinthians says this in verse 15. This is Paul writing, and he says, "And if Christ has not been raised from the dead, then my preaching is useless, and so is your faith." I mean, it's pretty strong and clear statement that he makes. If the resurrection of Jesus Christ had not happened, then we're wasting our time. This is pointless to be gathered here. We need to find another hobby or something. I mean, it's time to move on. But as sure as I am sitting here, I'm even more sure that Jesus is alive. That he rose from the dead and he is alive and well today and still in control as he looks upon us and is in our presence, and we're so thankful for that. There's a great old song that many of you are probably familiar. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow, and I just love that. He is alive. So this week is all about celebrating Jesus, and this coming Friday we're going to have a Good Friday service in here at 5:30. It is a very we call it unplugged. We don't have any technology or anything. We just want it to be it is an occasion that ultimately we're going to celebrate on Sunday, but on Friday it is about his death. And so we want to feel the weight of his death and what that must have been, the pain and everything that he went through. Then on Saturday, there's going to be a community-wide Easter egg hunt here in the village, and we are pretty much it. We put it on, we do everything, organize it and stuff, but it's a great way for us to love on our community and lots of kids and so forth. And so that is happening on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we're going to have a sunrise service. It's at Hale West Park. I don't know if you all know where that is, but if you know where the country club is, this is the easiest way to describe it. If you know where the country club is, Hawkstorm Country Club, the entrance to it, if you go straight out the entrance to it on that road that goes out from there, you'll run into the park. And so we'll have some chairs set up over there, and at 7:30 we'll be doing a sunrise service. It's going to be completely different though than what we do at 10:30. So if you do want to come to that, and it's great, please do. We'd love for you to come back at 10:30 also for our Easter service, our regular Easter service. So like I said, many things happening. We certainly want you to be here. We want you to invite people. If you've not already invited your unchurched friends and family and so forth to come and be a part, we would love for you to do that. It is, I tell people all the time, Easter is by far the easiest invitation you'll ever give anybody to church. I mean, everybody knows that church and Easter kind of go together. And so if anybody's going to ever say, yes, I'll come with you, it will be on that day. And so I strongly encourage you to do that. So, all right, let's move on. We're going to be now talking about Genesis and chapter 5. You can probably tell from what Dory read for us this morning, just before now we got up here. It sounds a little bit like reading a phone book. Some names and ages and all kinds of stuff. But listen, it's a lot more exciting than a phone book. I'll tell you that. So let's jump in there. If you have a Bible or church notes, go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 5. We'll start in verse 1. It says this: "This is the book of the generations of Adam. On the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and he blessed them and named them mankind on the day when they were created." By the way, something I haven't mentioned up till now in my series on Genesis, and here we are starting in chapter 5, but I haven't talked about who wrote it, who wrote the book of Genesis. Well, the answer is Moses. All right, the first 5 books of the Bible are known as the books of Moses. They're also called other things, the Pentateuch. I mean, if you get into all the different words, but the books of Moses is there, and it's pretty clever how that works out because Moses wrote them. They're his books, so they said, okay, let's do that. But obviously, Moses hasn't even come on the scene yet, right? I mean, we're still a little bit of ways from getting to where Moses is, and so obviously it was under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that the stories had been carried on and had been brought before Moses, that he was able to write them down, and so that we could have them as the foundation, if you will, of our Bible. Something else that's interesting about the books of Moses is they are foundational texts for the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, and the Christian faith. The 3 largest faith religions in the world are all anchored on the writings of Moses. It's pretty remarkable how intact that is, and so forth. So it really makes Moses the most popular human author in the history of the world, because he is well loved and well read by so many, and certainly we love Moses too. But so what Moses is doing here, as he's putting this down on paper, he's giving us a quick summary, if you will, of what's happened before going any further. He says, so up to this point, there have been 4 chapters and stuff, and he says, God made the world, and he made it, it was good. He said he made male and female, very good, they were very good. He brought them together in marriage, very good. And so everything was awesome, and everything was perfect, and everything was great that God created. But what Moses doesn't say here is that God gave Adam and Eve one rule to follow, and they messed it up. They kind of blew it right there from the get-go. And so what happens is sin entered into the world. And sin entered into the world, and all things started happening. I call it the world was fractured. We changed trajectory. Everything went in a much different direction after sin entered, and paradise on earth was ended. God had created the Garden of Eden. It was paradise. I mean, it was just everything. And boom, all of a sudden, it all ended. And so now, from that point on, and we started talking about this, God began his plan of restoration. So he's going to now restore. I want you to always think about where we're headed. People, like to talk about the second coming and when Jesus returns and the heavens and the earth, heaven on earth. It's basically restoring it back to Eden. So what he's given us is this wonderful picture of what paradise is in those first couple of chapters. And then now everything is about restoring that back to that. Now, that is the basic storyline of the Bible. And as we will see, God is going to work from generation to generation to generation, and he's going to give us the names of people in those generations to show us how things have been progressing ever since that time in the garden. By a show of hands, I'd like to know how many of you know at least one of your great-great-grandparents. Pretty good number, pretty good. All right. By a show of hands, how many of you know a great-great-great-grandparent by name? Wow. All right. Keep your hands up. I'm going to keep going. Great-great-great-great-great-grandparent. Wow. I knew the Hollands would be there. Let's go one more. 5. Great. Wow, you guys are awesome. I don't know how far back you go, but good. Let's just leave it there. That's amazing to know them by name. Now, we all know that we have great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, right? We all know that they existed one day, but it's hard we lose track over time, right? But listen, knowing your family tree can benefit you in a number of ways, and one of the ways is why I think God gave us several genealogies in the Bible. You know, not only here in Genesis 5, but also in the New Testament, we have those wonderful genealogies in Matthew and Luke as well. But they remind us, the reason why God did this is they remind us of the interconnectedness as human beings with one another. That there is this passing on of generation after generation. And it reveals a lot of the personal nature, I think, of God, that he cares so deeply for everyone that he would give us these names and allow us to see this, that it wasn't just, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, but there's a progression that took place. There's a lot that's behind that. And listen, as we, the people that we're about to read about, obviously, lived thousands of years ago, but we got to keep in mind, they were real people just like you and me. They had feelings. They had to, work and do things to survive, and all that went on. We probably have it a little bit easier than they did, but that was still, it was still part of it. So, but you need to remember, as much as all this is gone, God knows your name, and he knows that, the Bible says you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And it's so important that you just are so overwhelmed by the uniqueness of who you are, that God created you to be you, and that you are loved deeply by him, just like all these people throughout all of time, that Jesus created us all, and he loves us all. So I want you to see that when we talk about this genealogy as we go through it. So let's check out, starting in verse 3, it says this: when Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. Now, of course, those of you who've been here know that there was already Cain and Abel, right? So this is a little bit further down the road. Then the days of Adam, after he fathered Seth, were 800 years, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. They were created. I don't know why they were created in there. That may be a bit of a typo. Sorry about that. So scratch that. But he died. All right, that's how it is. You may, again, remember from chapter 4 that Seth appeared. We talked about that. And he was born, and it spoke about the lines that came from Adam, that he came out of the lineage of Adam. And so we talked about this. There was two lineages, if you will, that came from Adam, right? Cain and Seth, and how they went two different directions, right? And we talked about this a few weeks ago. The lineage of Cain was all about the city of man, and the lineage of Seth was all about the city of God. So that's where we ended then. Now, even if you don't remember any of that, just remember Cain bad, Seth good. And just try to shorten it for everybody. Okay, that's all you need to know, and you'll be tracking with this from here on. Because what we're going to start looking at is, let's follow the Seth line, because we already did look a little bit at Cain's the last time. All right. So the first thing that when we come to this passage and we look at, there's some pretty glaring questions, right? When you not yet. I want to point out there again. There's some pretty glaring questions in this passage when you look at this that we want to try to hone in on. You want to try to talk a little bit about, because they're not something that you can kind of easily pass over. So the first one is, how old was Adam when he had Seth? 130 years old. And then after that, he and Eve had many other sons and daughters. How many of you are glad you didn't wait until you were 130 to start a family? You talk about true love waits. That would have put a whole new meaning to it. Can you imagine, being 129 years old and saying, "Hey, babe, how about me and you get a little romantic evening and start a family?" That's getting kind of old. You're hobbling around probably. I don't know. We have a hard time imagining that in our day and age. But listen, Jan and I are about half that age, and it's not even a good idea for us at this point. So we're going to keep moving on. But it's just amazing when you start looking at it. Now, it also says here, one of those big questions in this thing, or that kind of stands out to you? It says Adam lived to be 930 years old. And you need to get used to that, because everybody going through this genealogy lives hundreds and hundreds of years for us to realize that, wow, something's different, right? I mean, you're talking about, the average life expectancy today is under 100, whatever it is, but it's not hundreds and hundreds of years old like it was back then. But it strikes the question, why? How is it that they could live so long? What is it that was different and stuff? Now, when I was in seminary, this was a topic of a lot of discussion. I remember going in our class, and there were a lot of things going on, and a lot of people talking about different things. So what I did is I kind of could go back in my memory a little bit and remember these were the things that I meant. Now, these are the reasons I remember talking about that I thought were very good reasons for how people could live so long back then versus what they are now. You may have other reasons, just email. I always like listening to that stuff, so go ahead. But anyway, here's reason number one. Adam and Eve, you remember from the beginning, Adam and Eve were created to live forever. They were what we now know, when we die one day, we'll have a resurrected body that will live forever. That's going to be a beautiful thing. It won't have any pain, no tears. It's going to be amazing to have the resurrected body that is one day. Well, essentially, Adam and Eve were in the front run of that. So when they were created to have this resurrected body, at least the thinking goes, the aging process began to happen, but not real fast. It wasn't like instantaneous that all of a sudden you're designed to live forever. Now you're only going to live to 90. It was a progression that started to take place, and so in that sense, 930 years is not much in comparison to eternity, right? If you're designed to live forever and it's cut down to 930, that's a pretty good drastic cut from where they were. But also, there's a lot to be said if you want to get into genetics and the mutations that take place. And so there was this perfect gene pool back then, and so you had a lot of the genetics were there to support living much longer. Over time, through generation after generation, all the way through, that began to get a lot of mutations began to form. All right. Secondly, back then there was no disease. Diseases hadn't entered. Sin entered the world, and then death and disease started to enter the world. But back then there wasn't really enough. There wasn't anything still that had presented itself or had come about. So here's Adam and Eve. They're designed and created to live in this perfect place where there's no death, no pain, no disease. And so it's very plausible that it would take some time for diseases to develop over the years and stuff. Of course, as disease develop over time, life expectancy begins to decrease. And if you were to try to graph something out from back at the beginning of time or beginning of the world as we see it in Scripture, and you had these people living to be 900 years old and so forth, it kept declining and declining, right, until you hit somewhere, probably in about the 1700s is when medicine began to start to, the Enlightenment came along, and we started to understand medicine some more, and so, it started climbing back up. But I remember as a kid, when my grandparents got to be about my age, they were like, it's time to say goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa because they're about done. So, thankfully, the trend now has been reversed, and we're headed in the other direction. And who knows? Maybe one day people will be living as long as they were back in Genesis. I don't know. I for one, pretty happy I'm not going to be around for those days, but that could happen. But listen, for one, I don't know that I could live through that many political campaigns. Could you imagine? You're 900 years old and you say, how many political campaigns have I gone through? I'm tired. I'm tired of this. I'm ready. Let's just move on. All right. So the bottom line is if you're a numbers person, you could have a lot of fun putting models together of population growth based on childbearing age and all of that, because what Jesus did, or what God wanted to do. Oh, number three, I'm sorry. Number three is God wanted to populate the world. He made that very clear. He said, be fruitful and multiply, right, to Adam and Eve. And they were obedient. They had lots of sons and daughters and stuff. But you know, when you live a long time, I mean, you can have a lot of children, assuming you're still in childbearing ages through all of that. So it was a way, and like I said, if you're a numbers person, you want to start putting some models together and say, based on childbearing age, if you've got like 800 years of childbearing age, you know, and you got 9 months, I mean, you could figure it out. You could come up with some numbers and how many kids you could have. You're talking about large family. You got a pretty big reunion taking place by the time you know get all those kids out there. So that's part of it. So just think about that. I mean, again, there's no reason, given all of those things, that the accuracy of what we're reading could happen. That this is what God intended and what He wanted to do. So I just want to throw that in. All right, let's keep moving. We got lots more to talk about. Verse 6. Now Seth lived 105 years and fathered Enosh. Then Seth lived 807 years after he fathered Enosh, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth were 912 years, and then he died. Now Enosh lived 90 years, and he fathered Kenan. And then Enosh lived 815 years after he fathered Kenan, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and then he died. Like I said, a lot of people lived a lot of years back then, and this pattern of living a long life and procreating a bunch of children repeats itself 7 more times. We're not going to go through, we don't have time to go through all of them, but I do want you to know that know their names and what their names mean. So thanks to our top-notch research department, aka Dory Lloyd, we have this little graph. Now you don't have to, if you want to take a picture, there's a handout on the table if you want to grab it. If you are in a life group, when I send out the discussion guide, I'll send out a copy of this as well. But if you're not in a life group and you want the discussion guide and or this list, you just text the number on the church and I'll be more than happy, or email me, whatever it is, and I'll be more than happy to send that to you. But here is, I think what's important is to realize that all names mean something and mean a lot. And so it starts from Adam to Noah. The purpose of chapter 5, by the way, is to get us from Adam to Noah. That's what you need to realize. And there's all these names that are spelled out for you, and they all have great meaning. One I like to point out is Noah means rest and comfort, and we're going to learn a lot more about that in the weeks to come. But so here is that list, and like I said, it will be sent out to you. One other important thing is that it makes a strong point in Scripture to say that they all died, right? I don't know if you noticed that. It said Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. Enosh lived 905 years, and then he died. And through that whole list, it keeps saying that except for this man. And we're going to jump down to verse 21 to read about him. Now Enoch, not Enosh, Enoch lived 65 years and fathered Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God 300 years after he fathered Methuselah. And he fathered other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away. Now that's different. He didn't die, right? Enoch, though, is the one believer that started in Seth. Remember Seth was a believer? So everything went all the way down. Enoch was the one believer in this. So he's the one believer in the family. Some of you are the only one believer in your family, and that happens. We see that from time to time. But here's some encouragement to you if you're in that place, but encouragement to you if you're a believer. your faithful walk with God, because of that, he'll take care of you, just like he took care of Enoch. Now I'm going to come back to Enoch in a moment, but I just wanted to make sure you saw that because it's so important to see that. Now, again, I'm going to come back to him in just a moment, but first I want to take a look at this in verse 25. It says, when Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years. And then he died, and Lamech had lived 182 years. He had a son, and he named him Noah. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died. And after Noah was 500 years old, they really waited a long time to get their family going. 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right, Methuselah, thing in this to note for your upcoming trivia test or trivia games that you're going to be playing, Methuselah is the oldest person in the Bible, okay? He lived to the ripe old age of 969 years. Now, again, the importance of knowing their ages is also important, just like knowing their names. Because you see, if you add them all up, you get 1,656 years. Now, if you add it up and get a different number, let me know, I guess. I don't know. I tried. But 1,656 years of family history from Adam to Noah. I told you the chapter is about us getting from Adam to Noah. Over 1,600 years. I mean, think about that. Think about going back 1,600 years. You're talking about within 300 years of Christ. I mean, this is a long period of time to go from Adam to Noah, but here it is. And of course, Noah is at the center of the next big event, right? And we will get to his very famous story, like I said, in a couple weeks. But the big takeaway for us today is that the names are important to God. I mean, unfortunately, I think we live in a world where most people feel like a number. You know, Bob Seger wrote a song about that one time, if you're a Bob Seger fan. But you feel, almost can feel like a number, like your name is not that important. I'm very fortunate. I had some great people in my life, and I learned a long time ago that one of the best ways to love other people is to remember their names. And I have made that a priority for me to remember names. And it isn't really that hard to do when you make it a priority to remember somebody's name. And listen, I don't want you to, I've been guilty of this. Don't buy the lie that I have a bad memory. You gotta get out and say, in Jesus' name, I command that lie to go. Because if you make it a priority and you get rid of this lie, you can remember people's names, and it is a way to express love and to show love to people. Because listen, if names are important to God, they should be important to me and you. And we've got to remember that. And also, don't ever forget, it takes so much, be overwhelmed by how much Jesus knows your name. And how he calls you by name. And how he loves you by name. He really, really does love you more than you can imagine. And guess what? He likes you just the way you are. Not some, well, if I do this, if I change that, if I go here, if I start this, no. He loves you just the way you are. And any shame you feel about your past is not from him. That is not from him. So continually receive his love and let that wash over you. If you are feeling any shame, again, command that to go. Jesus, I know that's not from you. I command it to go. Because God is all about love. He's going to speak love, and he's going to speak caring words over you. Now, let's talk about this one guy, like I said real quick, in the chapter who walked with God. Again, his name is Enoch. And it said this in verse 23, so all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Verse 24 says that Enoch walked faithfully with God and that he didn't die. Other than Jesus, he is one of only two people to have ever ascended directly into heaven. Elijah is the other one, by the way. Now, I don't think this is a particularly big spoiler alert, but when we get to Noah, there's going to be a devastating flood. Nobody looks shocked. Okay, good. I didn't think that I would ruin that surprise that God's going to judge the world in that way. But as we will see, God saves Noah and his family and all the animals from the flood. However, this is before the flood, right? This is before that happens, right? And this is where God saves Enoch. Another, I think, important takeaway for us today is to see that there are two basic ways that God helps us when we're in trouble. Sometimes he gets you out of it, like he did Enoch. And other times he gets you through it, like he did Noah. So sometimes he'll get you out of it. You know, oftentimes where our prayer is, get me out of this, get me out of this. It may be that he's going to just take you through it. Other times he may get you out of it. And it's interesting that Enoch had a short life in comparison to all the others, right? Yeah, I mean, even though other people lived 600 years more than him, longer than Enoch, they didn't walk with God. And listen, I think the question before all of us isn't how many days you think you're going to live. The question is, how closely did you walk with God in the days that you did live? How closely did you walk with God in the days that you did live? Because listen, you can live a long life and not know the Lord, and the last step is a terrible step. Or you can live a short life and walk with the Lord, and the last step is a magnificent step. The point is this: the only way to defeat sin and death and judgment is to walk with the Lord. The best visual I can think of in our physical world is to think of a way a child walks with a parent. When a child is little, they don't know where they're going, but the parent does. When a child is little, they don't know the danger that's lurking around them, but the parent does. Children don't worry where they're, when they have a good parent, right? They don't wonder where their next meal is going to come from when they have a good parent. They don't wonder if they're going to have a place to sleep at night when they have a good parent. You see, the unconditional love that a good parent lays, it lays this foundation for a child. And guess what? God desires to do the same for you. He's laying a foundation for you. He wants to lay this unshakable foundation for you based solely on his love for you. And as you grow in his love, it doesn't matter what storms come your way. It doesn't matter what's happening in your life. It doesn't matter how bad things get. If he's got that foundation in you, you remain strong in him. Then you know that everything is